Hey guys,
Hey
I'm Mindy
guys.
and I'm with Shaun today, and we're gonna do something we don't normally do, which is just kind of have a little bit of a Q&A with you guys. And I asked on Instagram for questions you guys had about Daxton and his autism. So I think we need to start at the beginning. So, because one of the questions I got asked a bunch, Shaun hasn't seen the questions, so I'm informing him at the same time I'm telling you. But one of the questions I got asked a bunch was if we knew he had autism when we adopted him. So the short answer is we got Dax at birth. Like literally I was there when his mom delivered him.
She cut the
and
cord.
I cut the cord. Yeah. So no, we didn't know he had autism. And I don't think most children, okay, first of all, I'm gonna preface this entire video with neither of us is a doctor or a specialist in autism. And we are learning every day as we go along. So I may phrase some things incorrectly, or I may say things that you, in your experience, don't agree with, and that's fine, because I would love to learn from you guys as well. So if
but please don't judge, because we don't, I mean, we're learning as we go, and we're meeting a lot of parents that are in these situations and worse situations, and we're trying to learn
from
how
each
to
other.
adapt, because that's how we know, is by sharing. If we don't share this information, we don't learn.
Right, I totally agree. Which I'm totally happy. If you guys have suggestions, comments, thoughts, things that have worked for you guys, just leave them in a comment down below in the bottom. I would love to have a conversation about this with all of you guys. Just do it nicely, please. So, I mean, I think for both Shaun and I, this subject is still a little tender. So, and we obviously are not experts at this, and we're still learning and we're still growing, so.
We also want to be clear that this really is Daxton's story. So there are some things that we're dealing with we will not be sharing, but we do want to show that even though we look on camera like everything's so great with our family, this is something we've really struggled with. It's been really hard on our family, and a lot of times our family revolves around, you know, how Daxton's day goes.
So I think it's true that it's, I mean, we take very seriously that it's Daxton's story, and that there are things that will not be shared, that he will determine at some point whether he's comfortable sharing or not. But it's also our story, and so I think that we are trying to find the balance of being able to share our story with you guys and also protect his story at the same time. So we're trying to do that delicately.
We didn't notice anything different about him until about 6 months, right? And that was when most babies start to crawl.
Well, I mean, I think the first thing we noticed, I mean, okay, because remember, Dax was kid number 5 for us. So we've been around through this process. We kind of knew like what milestones were normal. And I think that what we first started noticing was that he's a very sweet baby, very quiet, very pleasant, slept fine initially. And then around 6 months, what we started noticing was that he was extremely advanced on his large motor skills. So like he pretty much skipped crawling and went straight to walking. So there was none of that development. He was sitting up at like 3 or 4 months, like doing some things that were kind of atypical for a kid his age. But I mean, I wasn't worried about it. I just thought, oh my gosh, he's so advanced.
He's a boy.
Wow.
We didn't know. Like, we only had girls, so we didn't know what to compare against.
Boys must be more physical or whatever. And he climbed quickly. And then I think we started noticing around.
Well, he fell at like 6 to 8 months. He fell and hit his head on the back of a corner of our coffee table, and he laughed, which any of our other kids would have just wailed and cried because it would have hurt. We were like, this isn't normal. We don't know what's going on here. And that's when we started kind of going to the doctors and say, is everything okay?
Yeah, and I think that, you know, what we were finding out and hearing back from the doctors a bunch was that he was progressing, I mean, on track, and he seemed to be fine. So around like 18 months, I want to say, between 12 and 18 months, most kids start babbling. They start, even if they're not really speaking, they start doing like gibberish or ma, kind of like language, and Dax wasn't doing much of that. He was very slow to speak or make sounds.
Well, he would make sounds. He just wouldn't make verbal. Like he'd be ah, but he wouldn't be like ba 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 ba.
Yeah.
Or ka or like, you know, treat. He wouldn't go teat like the little kids would. He wouldn't do any of that.
And then around the same time, he also started having some sleep issues, where he literally just would not sleep. And it was horrible.
He would cry. We put him down, you know, 6:30
I mean, we tried
or 7.
everything. We tried rocking him, talking to him, holding him, loving him, tucking him, weighted blankets. I mean, everything. Tried everything that a normal parent tries. Letting him cry it out, like going in and out, and I mean, all of the philosophies and theories and of sleep things, and he just refused to sleep. And he would just go in his room, and it didn't matter what time we put him down or how we put him down. Inevitably, he would be up for like 2 hours minimum crying after we laid him down.
And then as he became more, you know, like standing and
when he could get out of his crib.
When he could get out of his crib, it became more of a, you know, he would pick at the wall and pick pieces of the sheetrock out, and then eventually the whole wall was all picked apart, or, you know, he would just, for whatever reason,
clothes on the floor, or
we were looking at our daughters and going, you know, they would just sit there with their bouncy little curls and just sit there and read stories and play with toys, and we weren't used to this, and people were telling us, oh, he's just a boy.
Well, I think the difference was that most kids, when they get bored, eventually they get tired and they fall asleep. And with Dax, he just didn't get tired.
His mind loved that stimulation.
He just kept going and going and going, and so he could never relax. And so then he would find ways to entertain himself. And if that meant breaking all his hangers, or throwing clothes on the floor, or smearing poop all over the wall, or things like that, that's what we were experiencing. And so, I mean, we tried everything.
So pretty much from the age of 3 to 5, we knew something was off, but there's nothing they could really do. We had physical therapy, occupational therapy, speech therapy, 5 or 6 different sets of doctors or programs that we had him in, trying to figure out.
Like early intervention, preschool.
Exactly.
I think that what we realized was something was atypical from what we had experienced with our other kids, but nobody would diagnose it. Like, it wasn't severe enough in any way or manifestation that a doctor could like put a label to it yet. And so they told us they thought he had a sensory processing disorder, that maybe like he wasn't, like, if a normal person would feel this, it would require this for Daxton to feel it.
Again, that felt good on my back though.
So it was, I mean, he just required a lot more touch and a lot more, like, I don't know how to explain
tactile.
it. Like, it was a lot more tactile. He was mouthing things and
toys that were more like brushes and you know, church.
Yeah, they gave us like an arm brush and did some therapy on his arms.
He loves that. He loves
or like with his toothbrush on his mouth and some things like that. Yeah, we had OT, PT, and speech starting at about 18 months.
18 months to about 3.5.
And then we did early intervention preschool, which also had some of those things in it.
One of the reasons we decided to move to Texas, one of the principal reasons was, where could we find one of the best school district special ed programs for Daxton? And we looked all over and found this school district is one being recommended. So it was one of the reasons why we moved here, to try to get him more that, once he was in full day school, a program that could really help him.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not gonna lie, Shaun's heard me say this before, but like, I actually have talked to therapists about this, but those years between 2 and 5 with Dax were like really hard, like really hard. Ugh. Hey,
I was in a bishopric in my church, which is like the presidency over a congregation, which meant I was giving about 20 hours a week to my church calling. At the same time, I was working in my previous career before YouTube as a business development director for international for Nature Sunshine products, and I was gone 1 to 2 weeks a month. So she was on her own, not just when I was out of town, but when I was home, I was doing church responsibilities and extra hours, which meant she was on him. So it was really hard on Mindy, and it was hard on me to see Mindy hurting and not knowing how to handle Daxton.
It was tough. We had 5 kids under 8.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so it was a lot. It was really busy, and I had just started all of the blog and things like that. So kind of playing double duty a little bit, and it was just really hard, but Dax was just a really hard kid. And I think that those 3 years, gonna be a big baby today in this video.
It was really hard.
Yeah, and some of it's positive. I feel like we've learned so much because of him, and I feel like we're a lot more gracious towards people around us and the things they may be going through. And I feel like some of my most treasured moments are those moments when you feel like you've made a breakthrough with him, because sometimes they're hard to get. So definitely some cherished memories with him, but also can be very challenging because of what we're dealing with. So I just don't want it to feel like it was all negative. It's not all negative. He's not all negative. Autism isn't all negative, but
we're learning how to deal with it. But what we found, he's a sweet little boy. He's a handsome little boy. He's a super smart little boy. And we're kind of excited to see, what he can develop, what he can do. There will be challenges along the way. I'm sure we're going to be learning along the way, but we moved to Texas because of the full day kindergarten.
We knew that the ability to get him into a full day program and also a full day good program would be beneficial not only to him but also to me, because I really needed to have a few hours away from him every day.
And we had Paisley at this point who also needed attention.
Anyway, so we moved to Texas and Dax started kindergarten. And I think this was our first time when he went into kinder that we actually felt like people were outside of our family, we're seeing the same things we were seeing on a daily basis. And when they diagnose ADHD, they don't do it usually pretty lightly. So with him, it wasn't until we could have it like
a second set of environment.
A second environment where they had to fill out all this paperwork and do all these scales and stuff too, to verify that it was like being seen in two places. And so when that happened, then in kindergarten, it was like maybe halfway through kinder that he was officially diagnosed with all 3 subtypes of ADHD. So
what does that mean?
Yeah, I mean,
all 3 subtypes?
I think that was kind of our first exposure and experience into, neurologically atypical, and what that means and how that affects his learning process, and what that, and we started having conversations about medication versus not medication. Yeah. And so like for Dax, initially, I think we kind of steered away from it, but as the school year progressed, he continued to have problems both in the classroom. And I mean, if you want to see me cry too, start talking about his kinder teacher, because she was a saint.
Was an angel.
Wow.
Yeah, and she loves him.
The year when we said goodbye, I literally
cried,
sobbed because she was so awesome with him.
She was amazing. Yeah.
I'm gonna be a huge baby all day.
It's all right.
Okay, moving on. So kinder had some ups and downs, and we finally just decided to try some medication. So we tried some different medication initially, and we didn't tell his teachers.
We didn't tell the teacher.
We wanted like
a blind test. We wanted to know whether or not it would work. Yeah.
So we put him on his meds, and literally like 2 days into it, the teacher called us and she was like, whatever you're doing, keep doing it.
And we're like,
because he's like a completely different child. And sure enough, I mean, for Dax, it required the medication to help stabilize his moods and help him focus better, and some other things in the classroom setting. And so when we got that all figured out, it was kind of towards the end of the year of kinder, and we rolled into first grade, and we were in a really good place. So first grade, I feel like second grade, third grade actually went really well.
Pretty much standardized, but
we had like little minor bumps.
Well, because as they grow, apparently their metabolism changes, and that changes how they absorb or the medication may be utilized. And
throughout all of this, Shaun and I had obviously, like anytime you're dealing with hardcore medication, you're going to see a psychiatrist who's an actual MD, and we had Dax going to a psychologist at the same time.
And his pediatrician.
And like we were working with a well-known group of medical professionals that were giving us advice and counsel, and helping us learn how to parent him and his type of learning.
We felt like we had the ADHD managed.
I feel like we had the ADHD in a good place.
Until the beginning of last school year. Not this school year.
We hit fourth grade.
Yeah.
And fourth grade, it just imploded.
Yeah.
It just.
And we won't go into details of how we were affected, but it affected everybody in our family to the point where it was a daily stress. We didn't know what to do. We called on a second big set of doctors, psychiatrists, specialists in ADHD, and the school was even saying that they felt like there might be some autism.
There was just some things happening at school and stuff still that
didn't make sense.
Didn't make sense with the classic ADHD situation, and nobody could quite put their finger on what was going on, but he was obviously not in a good place. Yeah. And so we took him to see a whole nother round. We were lucky here in Dallas. One of the questions I got yesterday was like, what unexpected blessings and hardships have you experienced? And I want to address that later, but one of the unexpected blessings that we've had is that we live luckily in Dallas, where there happens to be a plethora of very well-known autism specialists. And
in fact, the premier,
including one of the doctors that actually trains everybody else.
She's written the curriculum and the tests to help diagnose, kids on the autism scale, is in Dallas. And where people, why did you move to Dallas? Why from Utah? Why? We talk about the schools, and we talk about being closer for our business, being where there's better weather and what. But the fact that we moved to the city where Daxton's the best doctor we could have for him is here.
It was an unexpected blessing. Yeah, obviously we didn't know that when we moved here, but that was definitely a blessing. When you're dealing with autism or mental illness just in general, when you're talking about bipolar or they all overlap a little bit, a lot of them overlap. And so the doctors, it takes a while to kind of figure out exactly which one you're dealing with, and seeing them in multiple environments, the child, to kind of narrow it down. So we took him to one doctor and he was like, I'm pretty sure it's this, but I want Dax looked at again. So we went to a different doctor who said, I'm pretty sure it's this, but I want him looked at again. There were a couple things they thought Dax could have. We took him to a doctor who was like, I'm between these two, another doctor, and he thought it was autism. And then we took him to this one woman who's the foremost autism doctor in the area for sure. And she was like, 100% it's autism. And I think,
and at that point, he's just figuring out where on the spectrum he fell.
He got the diagnosis of autism, and I think that two of the doctors ranked him as a level 1 autism, which is the highest functioning autism. It used to be called Asperger's. I think some people still refer to it as that, but we've been told by our doctors that that's now it's by level. So, I guess you could say autism it's Asperger, but when the school also diagnosed him, they actually put him at a borderline level 2. So that's a little more invasive.
And the school used the exact same curriculum with the same doctor that we take him to. So he was tested twice by her curriculum.
Yeah.
By her methodology. One was level 1 and one was almost level 2.
Here's another funny for you. Here's another side blessing, was that when we were going through all of this, we independently, just through asking around and finding good doctors and getting doctors' references, ended up at two doctors in particular with Dax. And then when we went to the school with the paperwork
to get him into the
IEP and the 504 and everything that we needed, the amazing thing was that they were like, well, who did you take him to see? Because we have our own doctors that we use to do diagnosing. And it ended up being the exact same doctors.
It's the exact same
literally the exact same doctors.
Actually, both doctors that we had that were trying to...
His psychologist literally comes and speaks at the school all the time. We didn't know that. And his psychiatrist is the one that they use to do all of their diagnostics on kids as well.
So we know he's where he needs to be.
Yes.
We've been getting him as much help since the time he was about 6 to 8 months old. We've had a series of doctors, including his pediatrician, looking at him regularly and trying to help us, guide us on what to do. And we didn't talk about this with hardly anybody because we didn't.
Well, at least for me, I think, because he was officially diagnosed a year ago, and so he was a little older than most people are when they're diagnosed. He was 9, and I just think for me at least, I wanted to take time to process it myself before I really shared it. And when we were going through all of it, it was hard to determine where that line was of what's shareable and what's not shareable, and what should we talk about, what are we comfortable talking about. And so I think it took a little while for us to kind of process it and figure out where our comfort zone was, and then now I feel like we're in a place where we can share it with you guys.
But I think our mistake was we felt like that we shouldn't talk about it with people. And we found out that when we started talking a little bit and finding people who were in similar situations or in much worse, that the advice and the experiences they were actually, it helped us. It helped us feel like, we're not the only ones going through this. There are programs and groups of people out there that are helping each other like this. We need to become more active in this. Mm-hmm. And, I think some of the best advice that we've received, and Mindy's way better at it than I am in these groups, is from other moms that have autistic children.
Yeah. So I participate in a forum that's specifically for parents in Dallas of autistic children. And it's always really refreshing to go into the forum and read their stories and their experiences. But I've also gleaned so much information about different therapies or different groups that work or different tricks or trying different things with Dax. So, definitely having a community be involved if you have a child that has special needs for some reason is really important, I think, because you need to have, it's hard to explain to somebody what it's like to have a child until they do. And it's hard to explain to somebody what it's like to have twins unless they've had twins. And I feel like having a special needs kid, you can't fully comprehend what that's like unless you've done it or been there. Along with autism, he was officially diagnosed as well. So he does have the ADHD, all 3 subtypes. He has autism, he does have the hyposensitivity disorder, but he also has what's called Thrice gifted, which means that he's crazy smart. So
we've known that.
Yeah,
all along. Every teacher said, this kid is incredibly intelligent, mm-hmm. and we've always fostered that. We've put him in coding. He's in his 4th year, 5th year of coding. He's math and science.
He's the kid that you talk about the Titanic, and he can rattle every statistic, how many people were on board, how many people drowned, every
he can tell you what a feather would weigh if it were on a red dwarf planet.
He loves science too, science, space, history, the Titanic, he's just hyper focused on that stuff, and so he's crazy smart. So even though he's maybe distracted in class and has a hard time sitting still, he also learns so quickly that he still excels in his academics.
And even if he doesn't look like he's paying attention, I think this is some of the struggles that he had in school before they officially had him diagnosed with autism, is he doesn't look like he's paying attention, and yet he can answer your question. He remembers a lot, and he has, I don't want to say it's a photographic memory. It's only in the things that he is passionate about. He can remember everything.
Right.
And I think it's important for us to be clear, as we're talking about the struggles we went through, our love for him has never changed. He's a handsome little boy. He can be very, very sweet. Yes, we have those moments where we're like, this kid's a holy terror, but he is an amazing young man, and we love him to death, and we wouldn't change anything about it. But it doesn't mean that it was easy along the way.
No. Yeah, I think it's important to say there's positives, and we've had really amazing experiences with Dax because of the autism, and we've learned a lot. Of all of my kids, I always say the one I've learned the most from is Dax, because it's forced me to be a much more, I feel non-judgmental human being, because I just don't judge parents anymore. You just do not ever know what's going on with them, or perhaps with their children, and I'll just be honest with you, when we first had Brooklyn Bailey Camry, they were such good kids, and they were so easy, and we would go to church, and they would be sitting and folding their arms, and they would be so reverent, and we would see other families that were struggling, or their kids were crazy,
throwing things.
We would be
what's your problem? Get a hold of your kids.
All they have to do is parent.
It sounded so easy at the time.
Yeah, and we were so judgmental, and I look back on it now, and I'm I'm such an idiot. Now we go to church, and we have Dax, and he doesn't always behave like all the other kids do, and so sometimes I'm just please, just everyone be forgiving of what's my children, we're trying, we're doing our best, and that's all we can do. So now I don't ever look at other people, and you just never know what they're going through or what's happening with them. Daxton does go to just regular public school, the same school that all of our other kids went to. He is in a classroom where there's a few kids like him that are maybe neurologically atypical a little bit, and then mostly neurologically typical children. So, but they have 2 teachers in the classroom instead of 1. So that helps.
So one is the main teacher, teaches all the kids, and then there's one that kind of helps with the students that are, on that border of special ed to being, with the rest of the class.
Right.
That make sure that they're capturing the content and that their homework's organized and getting turned in. It's nice to have that additional help.
Daxton does have an IEP. When he had his ADHD diagnosis, he was on an IEP for a while. We had an ARD at one point, we've had ARD meetings and IEP meetings, but he was on an IEP and then he was on a 504 for a while because things got so much better that he didn't require the services of an IEP. Obviously, with the autism diagnosis, we went back to an IEP, and he definitely does have some things written into his IEP to help him with school.
Just accommodations to make sure he has the best chance to succeed. And we kind of adopt some of those things in our home too, to try, in some of our daily lives, some things that we would have a more difficult time, we try to adopt some of those accommodations to make it more successful at home as well.
Yeah, I 100% agree.
Magnet boards.
We've done magnet boards. One of my favorites is, the thing with autistic kids a lot of times is that they are bothered by specific things. Sometimes it's noise, sometimes it's the way their clothes are fitting on their skin. Sometimes it can be something that they're seeing or like just too many people. And it seems like to me like every autistic child is maybe a little different that way. So like noise doesn't really bother Dax. I've never seen him react to noise.
Water and cold are the 2 things he can't
temperature,
stand. Cold and water.
Or I see him with his clothes once in a while, but not a lot. He hates socks, or if things feel itchy on him, he like really is bugged by that. But largely he doesn't have too many issues with that. He doesn't get super overwhelmed by large groups of people, but I think that he gets overstimulated. So when that happens,
he can be hard to handle. Yeah.
He can be hard. Like transitions for Dax are not good.
Change is not good.
Like quick transitions are a definite hard
so
spot.
A lot of times people, many of you watching will be like, hey, how come you didn't take, Daxton and Paisley on that trip to England or Africa? And now that you see this, you'll kind of see obviously Paisley was too young for the time difference, and Daxton was too, but managing him with that much outside stimulation in a trip like that, and a lot of times we're working while we're there, it's just impossible to do.
That would be very, like Daxton's all about his schedule, which I think is a blessing for our family, maybe, that he came to us, because if I'm nothing else, I'm very schedule oriented,
very regimented,
and very organized.
How else could we do everything we do with YouTube and 6 kids and straight A students and all the sports and activities if she wasn't regimented?
So I think that's a good thing, because it puts him on a very, we have a very specific schedule every day.
What his schedule is.
And the morning routines and the nighttime routines are always the same, or at least almost always the same. And so taking trips with him is hard because it shifts his entire schedule and it flips it, and he doesn't.
New people, new places,
and so it can be much more difficult, which is part of why it's just easier, and he's happier a lot of times if he just stays home. But there are instances where we literally just can't.
Happen, and you got to do what's easier for him.
Or he's just flat out happier if he's not on the trip, just because his schedule doesn't shift. My phone is going crazy. Hello? Mom, can I call you back? We're filming. Okay, bye.
She's going crazy. What are some of the questions they had?
Questions. What are some techniques, or what are some coping techniques we can use? So ones that I see working for Dax, we don't call it a timeout, we call it a brain break. So if I can sense...
Timeout sounds negative.
Yeah, it sounds like it's his fault.
It's like a jail.
I think the thing we are learning with Dax is there's a difference between him making the choice to be naughty and him just literally hitting the place where his brain is overstimulated and he can no longer process.
Yeah.
And so
you can't punish that because it's not his fault. And so
when that happens, we try to do brain breaks. And so it's kind of like a timeout where we put him in a certain spot in the room where I can see him, and he just has to kind of take a minute and try to calm down and It's usually somewhere a little more quiet so that he's not being overstimulated. I found a little tin. I love this tin. I wish I had it. I'll find it and put a link in the description box, but it just has all these words like frustrated, tired,
sad,
angry, sad, happy, like all these descriptive words about how you might be feeling. And it has like a little line on it. It says like how I feel right now, and then it's like how I want to feel. And so they're little magnets on the tin, and so he can put, like while I have him on brain break, I'll just have him put up like, how are you feeling right now? Feeling frustrated, overwhelmed, whatever. And then how do you want to feel? Calm, you know, happy, peaceful, whatever. But usually by the time, I think it's more of just a, like gives him something else to think about. And when he's done thinking about that, then his brain has like regulated itself again. And so then he's like ready to be back into processing with everyone else. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, we've tried magnets, we've tried a magnet board to kind of work his schedule. We're still working on scheduling with him. Like that's not one of maybe his strong suits. Like getting himself up in the morning and like managing his own time and his own schedule. So we're working on that one. Okay. Does he have outbursts and temper tantrums often? And if so, how do you handle them?
This is like one of the hardest parts for us because yes, it's often, I mean, he goes through spells.
I feel like there's like periods where it like seems like it's really bad, and then we'll go for a long time and there won't be very many.
It's so normal to us that we don't notice them, but I mean, it is pretty irregular.
I don't think it, I mean, listen, when I think about how he was when he was 5 or 6 compared to now, I'm like, wow, he's grown so much. We've all learned so much. Like he's doing so much better than he used to do. And part of it is us learning how to work with him and how to like work better for him and be better parents for him. And some of it is like kind of knowing what his triggers are and like avoiding those things. Okay, my brother has high functioning forms of autism. My mom never really told him, does Dax know he has it? So yes, the short answer on that one is yes. Daxton knows. I mean, he went to all of those doctor's appointments. It's like,
well, remember how I told you how Daxton, when it comes to science and math and space and coding, computers, he remembers everything. So when we're in these doctor's appointments and the doctors are talking to us, he's there in the room because he's a little boy, but he remembers some of the things that, you know, you wouldn't expect a kid of his age to. Like he picked up on some of the medical things. He knew that there was something with his brain. He says, my brain has a hard time focusing on things. My brain doesn't have a certain chemical in it so that it can respond appropriately. So he heard those things from the doctor. So we obviously had to address some of those issues. We don't talk about more of the finer things that we have discussions with, but he knows he has autism.
Well, a lot of times the doctors address him directly. I mean, they'll ask him like, how does this make you feel? How does this make you feel? Or when you experience this at school, what do you see? And do you tell the kids that you have autism? Or, you know, I mean, like they're asking him those questions. So it's not even like us choosing to tell him. He's literally in those conversations with us. And so he's experiencing them and participating in them.
And when we talk about autism, it's not a negative thing with him. You know, we talk about it in a positive way, that he has these special abilities, that he's so good in math and science, and that he scores above everybody else. On his kindergarten testing that they gave him in the school district, he had the highest score out of any other kid in the school district in the past 20 years. So Daxton, when we talk about his autism, it's like it's almost kind of like a superpower.
Yeah, but I think we don't shy away from telling him he has it, and maybe it's because we're not addressing it negatively all the time. It's more of just like, it's like me saying I have blue eyes, you know, or I have brown hair, or I'm short, and that's just part of who I mean, I'm never gonna be able to reach the top cupboard without a ladder because I am short. So Dax has autism, and that means there's things that he maybe will have a harder time doing, and there's things that are maybe easier for him because of his autism, and it's just that he has to navigate those waters and figure out how to work around or build strengths in what are his weaknesses right now, but then utilize the strengths to become even better. So I think that's why we're not afraid of addressing it. So yes, he knows. What is the biggest difference when parenting a child with autism versus another child? I mean, I think that
we had to reprogram our parenting.
Yes.
I mean, that this is probably the hardest thing, at least for me personally, was because, I think we all tend to raise our kids in that punitive way. Like, if you don't do this, you're going to be grounded. Or, if you stay up on your phone texting your friends, you're going to lose your phone. I mean, that's how we were all raised. We had something removed from us, something that we really liked because of a natural consequence to some rule we broke. With Daxton, we're finding that doesn't work. And we had to almost kind of learn how to reparent him, which is what, in addressing this question, we had to parent our kids almost in two different ways.
Well, I think for me, it was about, and maybe I should be better about this across the board, but I mean, like, I don't necessarily every day, like, go, Rylan, good job waking yourself up this morning. That was awesome.
Because those are things you
just like they're just do, things that you feel like you teach your kids and then they should just do,
like
I guess.
Breathing, or eating.
But with Dax, it's like we have to celebrate every little milestone because some of them are more challenging for him and some of them aren't things that come naturally to him. I do think that one of the biggest things in the family is that with all of the other kids, like, you kind of you have some sort of expectation that they will conform to, like, what's the collective whole's best interest. So, like, as a family unit, like, you kind of adapt to each other. And one thing that I find difficult maybe with autism is that they don't always do that. Like, I feel like with Dax, at least, sometimes he kind of lives in his own little world a little bit, and if it doesn't directly interact with him or his world or seem interesting to him, he doesn't care. And so that can be challenging when you're dealing with a large family dynamic like we are, or a busy schedule, because what he wants to do or what fits in his little universe doesn't always fit or work for what the family universe is. And so that's sometimes when we find the conflict, and then you have to try to find creative ways to, like, get him to be interested in or doing the things that you need him to do, using that positive reinforcement, or, like, helping encourage it with positive, like, rewards. Does his mental age seem younger than his physical age? Daxton's mental age is probably 1/3 of less than his actual physical. So he right now is almost 11.
Yes, he's almost 8.
So I always say he basically acts whatever Paisley's age is, because there's like 2.5 years between them. So if Paisley's 7, Daxton's pretty much acting like a 7-year-old most of the time. So I mean, like, really, in a lot of ways, our family, it feels like.
No, I would say that's primarily in social situations. I think when it comes to his interests, like coding and those things, he actually ages significantly higher, like a senior in high school.
The stuff he's interested in.
The stuff he's learning, the stuff he's interested in is much higher. So that question kind of has two answers. It depends upon what, if you're talking about a social sphere or knowledge-based, he's in two different areas there.
I'd agree with that. I think that if it's one of the things that he's, like, clicked on, he is
very
way
mature,
ahead.
Yeah.
But
very attentive.
It's more like academics and like memorizing things and that type of stuff when it comes to, like, his interactions socially, or perhaps sharing. Like his, like, interactions at home with, like, managing his own schedule or regulating his own homework or
eating his meal,
things like that. Then he ages more like Paisley. So it's almost like we have 2 7-year-olds right now, is kind of what it feels like sometimes. I do have some people ask us if we tell other people that he has autism, like, and if so, why or why not? Like, I've literally seen time and time and time again where parents or other children or even teachers, they expect him to act like he's 11, and they expect him to behave like an 11-year-old, and they expect him to socially be able to do what 11-year-olds do typically, and then Daxton doesn't do those things. And so initially, I mean, the hard thing with autism is, at least with Dax, he doesn't outwardly look different. Like, you wouldn't know that he has special needs, or you wouldn't know that he's neurologically atypical just by his physical appearance. And so
your expectations are, people's
expectations are over here, and then he doesn't always do that. And so
we've seen that with like neighbors, like neighbor kids' parents.
Yeah, then other kids can become frustrated with him because he's not socially responding.
He's in their personal space.
Or he's in their personal space.
Acting younger than his real age.
He's not sharing things like another kid would, or whatever it may be. And so I find that sometimes there tends to be people that don't respond to him very well because they see him as just being like the annoying kid that doesn't behave appropriately. And that's super frustrating to me because that's not what Dax is. And
his autism doesn't define him.
It doesn't define him, but at the same time, like, it allows people, I find that people are much more forgiving of him and the way he processes and the way he thinks, or being patient with his learning style if they know that about him. Where if they don't know that about him, they just kind of almost sometimes can be a little harsh with him.
And I don't go out, I generally wait for their situation to arise where it's necessary for me to inform them. Meaning that in a situation where I feel like he may be judged unfairly because of his behavior, will I then tell him? I don't just kind of come out when I meet somebody and talking about him and say, this is my son Daxton, he has autism.
That's not what I say. It's not like, hey, this is Dax, he has autism. But I feel like if it's a situation where I can see that it's happening, or that he's behaving differently, then I will, kind of clue them into the fact that, this is maybe his normal. Anyway, he's very smart, and he definitely, I think we're in a really good place. But, every year brings something new, and every year he changes a little, and sometimes it's better, and sometimes it's things that are a little more difficult.
So we felt like it was important to kind of give you an inside look into what goes on in our family that you may not be aware of, because we all have issues. Everybody has issues they're dealing with. And sometimes we seek other people to try and help, validate how we're feeling, or give us solutions, or share experiences so we feel like we're not alone. And I think we've kind of kept it in for so long, it feels good to kind of talk about it a little bit. There's a lot of you out there who have a lot more experience with this than maybe we have, and can give us some ideas. And there may be some of you who are just entering into that, wondering, how do I go about this? And some of the things we've shared may be able to help you.
Yeah, I just want to reiterate, autism isn't who he is completely, but it's definitely a part of who he is, and it definitely does affect a lot of aspects of his life and the way that he thinks or behaves. And so that in turn has, affected our family. We just don't know. We don't know what it looks like for him in the future. I hope and encourage him to do what all the other kids have done. And, I don't want to put limits on his ability or what he is capable of at all. But I also, know that we may be having different conversations with him as an adult than we do with our other kids. I just don't know at this point. He's still too young, I think, to kind of
we don't know how
it will play out.
But every night before I tuck him into bed, we have a routine, we have a system in place with them. And I take a moment and tell him how much he's loved, how much we appreciate him, how handsome he is, how smart he is, and then we sit down and he says his prayers. And it's because even though throughout the day there may be some moments where we're frustrated with the situation or at him, and we're trying to learn how to be parents in the situation, we don't want him to go to bed feeling like, that's his interaction with us. So we always try to end on a very positive, we love you, and you're loved by tons of people, and you're so handsome, and you're so smart, and it's very important for us that he hears that.
Pretty much it, I guess. Yeah, I'm such a baby when it comes to Daxton.
That's because you love him.
Such a baby. I think it's just because it's so tender. I don't know. I've cried more with him than any other kid.
What we do feel is that he was led to our home because we would get him as much help as we could early on, and we did. He's had between 3 and 4 doctors every year since he was 6 months old, trying to give him the best chance to succeed. We were led here, we feel, through prayer and answers to prayer, to a school district that had the best special ed program for him, with a kindergarten teacher that helped integrate him from home life into full day school life, who was an absolute angel. We are here where the best specialist for his kind of autism lives and works, and we see her regularly. He is where he needs to be, and we're lucky to have him.
We are lucky to have him.
So if you have any other comments or questions about, you know, our situation with Daxton or anything else that goes on in our lives, feel free to leave them down below. We're happy to do another video like this in the future. Just kind of give you an inside peek behind the camera, behind the braids, right?
Yep.
Okay, go ahead and sign up.
All right, well, we will talk to you guys later.
Thanks again.
Bye guys.
Bye.